Hey everybody, Doug here. I wanted to do kind of a short, informal video today talking about the differences between the Sony PXW-Z200 and the FX6. It was what's the ILME-FX6? Anyway, so yeah, the Sony FX6, whatever its full model number is. I had the chance to rent one of these over the weekend for an event, and I wanted to do a few initial comparisons between the two cameras. There are a lot of similarities. You can tell they're designed by the same teams. A lot of these use the same software. A lot of the same electronics, in fact, I'm sure as well. But take a kind of quick look at the differences between the two cameras, particularly where it comes to image quality. So with that, let's dive right on in. All right, so I have two cameras here in front of me. So here's my Sony PXW-Z200, or one of them. I have four of these now, if you didn't catch that already here on the channel. Love these cameras. These are fantastic for live production, which is what I typically do, where I work in a lot of situations where I need the versatility of a long zoom range more than having the absolute best image quality. But that said, I have no qualms, no issues with the image quality on the PXW-Z200. Now, this camera is what I would consider in a lot of ways a baby FX6. And over here on your right, I have an FX6 that I've rented for an event that I was working on this weekend. We put this camera on a jib, and it did a pretty good job of what we intended it to do. But it wasn't without some compromises, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that this is an interchangeable lens camera, and it has a full frame sensor on it. So that can be an advantage in a lot of situations, but it can also be a disadvantage at times as well. So in this video, I want to kind of talk about some of that. Now, in terms of the overall cameras themselves, as you can see, there we go. They look pretty similar in a lot of different ways. Very similar design cues throughout. So both have kind of that curvy body element to them. A lot of the buttons are in the same sort of place. Like I say, it's very clear that the same teams that designed the FX6 also worked on the Z200. And I think that's a great thing, because the prior cameras that were sort of in this part of the lineup, the Z150, the Z90, some of the other ones that came before, were a little bit more consumerish. And with the move to being designed by a more cinema-focused team, this camera has upped its game quite a bit compared to some of the older ones. That said, though, I mean, it's not a camera that I'm going to recommend for somebody who's doing cinema-type work, where you need to be able to work in a lot of situations where you've got low light, and you need to be able to dial in the focus quickly between a couple different elements on screen and accurately. So you're using high-quality lenses that have markings on them. This is not going to be the camera for you if you're working in that particular environment. It's got a 1-inch sensor as compared to a full-frame sensor, and so you're not going to have quite as much separation from your background with your subjects in terms of depth of field or bokeh. So if that's the sort of workflow you're looking for, this is not going to be the camera for you. But for the world that I live in, where I work in a lot of different situations, and I have to be able to accommodate a lot of different types of scenarios. Sometimes the camera needs to be close, sometimes the camera has to be far away, sometimes I need to be able to get wide and tight shots with the same camera. This is going to beat this because of its versatility in a lot of those situations. Now, that said, if you're looking for that cinema look, you've got great camera operators that are really good about maintaining focus, then you can do an amazing production, absolutely amazing production with gorgeous images when you move to something like this with a larger sensor and the ability to swap in different lenses depending on what your needs are and what your budget is. So that's another big difference between these. This camera, you get the whole thing, lens, everything, $4,000. Over here, just the body is, I think it's about $6,000, and then you've got to add lenses onto it before you can actually start shooting anything. And this uses the Sony E-mount, which offers a lot of lenses, but maybe not as much as some of the lenses that you might be using if you're doing other cinema workflow where you're using a PL mount, or if you're doing broadcast where you're typically be using, say, a B4 mount. But anyway, I don't want to spend this whole time just talking about the cameras. I actually want to show you guys some images from these, and I'm going to start by actually putting each of these cameras setting them up here in my little basement studio and kind of letting you see what the image looks like. The camera that you're looking at here right now, this is the Sony PXW-Z200. It's what I normally use here in my basement studio, and I'm going to put on the FX6 with a Sony lens. This is a 16-35 T3.1. For those who are not familiar with the T nomenclature, it's similar to F, the F number on lenses, but accommodates for the light loss that happens within a lens. So a T3.1 in this case has an f2.8 aperture on it. And again, this is a full frame sensor on this camera, and so it's going to be fairly similar in look to what you're going to see if you were shooting images on a full frame still camera, or say something like the Sony, one of the Sony R series cameras or whatever. So anyways, okay, I'll swap that in. Alright, here we're taking a look at the Sony FX6. This is coming out of the camera live, coming out via SDI. I'm not using internal recording on the camera. This is going into a Blackmagic switcher, ATEM 1ME, ATEM Constellation 4K, and then being recorded on a HyperDeck in ProRes, and then of course you're watching it through YouTube compression, so keep that in mind. This camera, I was going to try and open up the aperture as much as I possibly could, but if I did that, the image was overexposed, and then when I engaged the neutral density, it was too dark, and so I would have had that gain. But I elected, in this case, to go ahead and stop it down rather than using ND and gain in order to get the image exposure to where it needed to be. So we're at roughly T 5.0, thereabouts. So just keep that in mind. It's not going to be quite as wide open as this lens is capable of. And so you're not going to see as much of a shallow depth of field as you might, though it's not a huge difference. This one only goes out to 3.0. Now, in terms of the image quality of the camera, we'll go ahead and do a 2x crop here in post, and so you can kind of see what the image is going to look like coming out of the camera on the SDI port. Now keep in mind that this is being shot in a basement studio where I've got a lot of light. I've got two 200-watt fixtures just to my sides, and then a bunch of lower wattage fixtures around me, so there is quite a lot of light in this situation. And if you're normally shooting indoors in ambient light, you're going to be needing to do something additional in order to get the gain of the image up. So if you're shooting in a lot of different venues where you're not bringing in lighting, you will have to keep in mind that you'll be adding a lot of gain to an image like this in order to get a usable image. And that's going to be true on most any of the cameras that are out there. That will vary from lens to lens on the FX6, so do keep that in mind. Now, in terms of the workflow of the FX6 compared to the Z200, the menus on the two cameras are more or less identical. There are a few small differences here and there, but you can tell that the two cameras were designed by the same teams, so that they actually work very similarly to one another. And because I've become very familiar with the menus on the Z200 since I got my first one back in September, I've been extremely at home with the FX6. The only exception being that it doesn't have the custom user menu that I've built on the 200s, but of course I could if I wanted to do that. So, but in terms of being able to use the cameras, felt right at home, no problem. I adapted to it right away. I didn't have to read the manual for anything. I was just able to dive right in and use the camera, no problem. Let's see what else. So in terms of some of the capabilities of the camera, so the camera does have autofocus, and I am using that here in this situation, but that of course is going to be dependent on the lens that you're using having the electronic focus control. This particular lens that I'm using here does. The other lens that I rented and used for the event, this Ingenue, does not. Just for anybody who's wondering, this is the they call it the f22 to 60 T3. So it's the focal length on it is 22 to 60 millimeters T3, and it is the full frame version of the lens. Very heavy, very expensive, not a lens that someone purchases without weighing the decision ahead of time. And the rental on this stuff was not inexpensive, so getting the camera in these two lenses for 4 days cost me about $1,200. So we're not talking about something that's super cheap. And if I was doing much of that kind of work, I could buy another one of these cameras. So if I'm just renting for more than a week, I could actually outright purchase a Z200 instead. But then of course, they are different cameras, different uses, and so you have to keep that in mind. All right, you can certainly ask me any questions about any of these cameras. I'm not going to be an expert on the FX6, that's for sure. If you have any questions about these cameras, you can certainly leave those in the comments. Now, before I move on, I'm going to do kind of a brief side-by-side of this with the Sony PXW-Z200 that I normally use here in the basement. So, note to myself in editing, put up a little bit of footage from the Z200 side-by-side with the FX6 while I talk about this. Both of these are going to be 2x crops, so you're able to see a little better at the pixel level what the amount of detail on these cameras is actually like, and be able to get a better feel for how much noise these cameras have in this particular basement studio. So keep in mind that your mileage will vary based on the situation that you're working in. So, all right, okay, with that, let's go ahead and swap in the Z200. All right, here you're looking at me on the Sony PXW-Z200 camera. So this is the camera you're seeing here on my desk a moment ago. For anybody not really familiar with this camera, this is a new Sony camcorder introduced back in September, I believe it was. It's a new model in the lineup. It doesn't replace an existing model. It's kind of a combination of a few different models. It is, aside from some consumer-style cameras, their current entry-level model in their professional camcorder line. But that said, it is what I think to be, I think it's actually very good for what it is. So the image you're looking at with me here, it is set to f4.8. I had to stop it down. 0 dB of gain, kind of gives you an indication of how much light there is here in the room. And shutter speed of 1/60th of a second. And that was true on all the cameras that we're seeing here today. They're all set to 60th of a second exposure. So anyway, so this is what the image on the Z200 looks like. This is also set to cinematone mode as well. So it has a slightly more cinematic look to it than the Rec 709 that we see in some of the other cameras. And for anybody who's been following my series here on this channel about the Z200, about 2 months ago, I did make the switch from shooting everything in 709 to cinematone. I like the richness of it. It looks overall better. There's less clipping in the highlights with the cinematone mode. Colors are richer, more vibrant. The image overall is more punchy. It feels a little bit more cinematic, but overly saturated compared to what you typically see with cinema style image and gamma. So we'll go ahead and do the 2x crop here on this camera as well. Again, this camera is being the signal flow is output from SDI, shooting in 4K at 10-bit, shooting 30 frames per second on all of these cameras. Fortunately, they do all offer that natively, unlike some of the other cameras that are out there in the world. Again, this image is going to be slightly overexposed. That was by choice. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to see if there's any how much noise there is in the image, especially in the background. So if you kind of look over my shoulders or more down here, you might see that there is a little bit of noise in the image. But overall, I think the noise level on this camera is very good for what it is. The main reason to consider a camera like this is the versatility for those who are working in live production and need to be able to adjust your focal length very quickly, need to be able to zoom in very close to something from far away, and not have to spend a fortune on expensive lenses. So this camera sells for $4,000 currently, pending what's going on with tariffs and whatnot. But $4,000 for this camera, and then they have a slightly less expensive version of it, the HX800, which sells for, I believe it's $3,400, which removes the HDMI and a couple of internal features, nothing that's too big. The biggest change is the lack of SDI on that camera. Now, this camera, again, is very similar to the FX6 in terms of the way that it works. And feature set, they both have neutral density, variable neutral density filters, which is an amazing feature. If you've not used that, that's something that's definitely a game changer. Allows you to really dial in your exposure very accurately. So you're able to achieve a consistent look in terms of the depth of field and noise levels on the camera just by adjusting your neutral density, and those changes are made smoothly and easily. So if you're in a situation with variable lighting, ND, having the variable ND is kind of a game changer in terms of the capabilities of the camera. In terms of the modes that the camera has for shooting, they're kind of similar between the two, although this one, the FX6, is, again, more cinema focused. So some of the stuff that you can change in there is going to be weighted towards cinema. Some of the defaults are going to be weighted that way as well. So, but either one, both cameras are going to be able to achieve similar set of features. Now, the Z200, because it is newer, is going to have a few features that are not present on the FX6. A couple of the ones that are most notable that way, one of them is the AI autofocus. So this camera has an autofocus system that uses artificial intelligence in order to detect not just where someone's face is, but it actually looks for the human figure. And so it's able to determine what in an image is a person, even if they are turned away from the camera. So you're looking at their back. It's still able to determine that's a person and able to use that information in order to know where to focus. The AI features on this camera also extend to a feature that allows it to zoom in and follow a subject around. So they call that AI framing. That's a pretty cool feature. I've used it a number of times, and it does a really good job. And the image quality doesn't get degraded too much when you do that zoom, particularly if you limit it to 3 times or less. And the camera can absolutely do that. So you have control over how much zooming it does. And it even has a feature where it'll periodically zoom in and zoom out. And so you can kind of make it look a little bit more like there's a human operator on there. Its motions are nice and smooth because it's just cropping in on the image. It's not physically moving the lens around. But that also means that if someone steps out of the frame, the wide frame, that they are going to disappear. The camera's not going to follow them like you might find on, say, a PTZ camera. But I will say the AI auto framing feature is actually quite good. I was rather impressed by it. It has one limitation that sort of drives me crazy. When the feature is engaged, the SDI output on the camera goes black, and it's only output on the HDMI. But that said, you can output the cropped image and record the full image, or vice versa. You have full freedom in choosing which of those two images you're able to record and which ones you're outputting on the HDMI. So other than that, feature-wise on the cameras, not a whole lot of other differences. The biggest feature difference between the two is obviously interchangeable lenses on the FX6 versus a fixed lens that is built into the Z200. Now, I will say that even though it's a fixed lens, it does seem to be a very, very good lens. It seems to be very sharp, very crisp. My only complaint with it is when you start to zoom in, your maximum aperture is going to be f4.5, which can be frustrating. So if you start out full wide at f2.8, which it will do, basically as soon as you start zooming in, it's going to drop to f3.1, and then f3.4 and 3.7 and so forth until you get up to f4.4, which the camera doesn't let you choose manually. The closest you can get is f4.5. Sorry, take that back. It's the other way around. So the maximum aperture is 4.5, and then the closest you can choose is f4.4. So that little discrepancy means that when you go from wide to tight, if you have it set to f4.4 for the last little bit of the zoom range, the image is going to be darkened ever so slightly. It's not enough you'll ever notice it, though, so I wouldn't worry about that much. And on top of that, it has clear image zoom, as does the FX6, actually. They both have clear image zoom on them, which allows you to effectively crop in on the sensor a little bit and extend the zoom range by up to 1.5 times when you're shooting 4K or 2 times when you're shooting in HD. I don't remember if the FX6 can do the 2 times or not, but either way, they both have the clear image zoom, and it is fantastic. I would not hesitate to use it if you want a little bit of additional reach. With the clear image zoom, the effective zoom on the Z200 goes out to 40 times when you're shooting HD, 30 times when you're shooting in 4K, and the optical zoom on that camera goes to 20 times. So an amazing range, and that allows us to use the camera to be able to shoot a subject from quite a long way away. I've shot a number of conferences where camera's way in the back and still able to zoom in pretty tight on a presenter that's at a stage 200 feet away, and works well. The only caveat there, make sure you've got a great tripod and a very good camera operator. But you can get, even with the stabilization turned on the camera, any kind of little vibration movement by the camera operator is really going to be seen at that kind of distance. Now, with that said, you've had plenty of time now to look at the image on the Z200, and we're going to move on to the next section of the video. All right, for the rest of the video, you're going to be looking back at my Z90V again, but I do need to pause here in terms of the way I'm shooting this, because I need to get this FX6 shipped off. It is due to be shipped off today, so I'm going to take care of that. But for the remainder of the video, we're going to be looking at some footage that I shot on this camera earlier today, and if I get permission, fingers crossed, from the event that we shot on Saturday, I will include some of that footage as well, so you can see some of the footage from the FX6 side by side with some footage from the Z200. So, okay, all right, so I'm going to go ship this off, and I'll be back in just a moment. All right, let's take a look at some footage from an event I did a couple days ago. What I'm going to show you first here is actually the 1080p line cut that we did of the event. We shot in 4K in the cameras, but switched in HD, just because that was going to be easier. A lot of the pre-production material that they had created to go along with this was all done in 1080p, and it just seemed easier to go ahead and switch in 1080p. But like I say, all the footage was actually shot in 4K, and after I show you this short clip, I will pull in the 4K footage, and we'll take a look at that. So what I'm going to show you is one of the songs that was performed by a band, a charity event that I helped to produce a couple days ago. All the cameras, except for one, were Z200s, and then the last camera was the one on the jib, and it was an FX6 with the Sony lens that I showed a little bit ago here in this video. So same camera, same lens. I set them all to cinematone so that the coloring would be identical. I was more focused on setting up audio. I had some Dante stuff that I had to configure, and I let somebody else do the final configuration for the cameras. So I'm pretty sure that some of the other settings didn't get duplicated. I don't think the black level and the saturation boost were actually engaged in the FX6, but the other cameras should have been set the same. So anyway, I'll just go ahead and roll some of the footage here, and we'll talk as we go. So, all right, so the Z200s were set up various points in the room. This shot here is a jib shot, and you can see a lot of those jib shots are going to be from the side, and even a couple of them from behind the band, showing out from behind, showing the band and the audience from behind. So the other shots are all in Z200. Even though this is only 1080p, it actually looks, I think it looks pretty good, especially considering the lighting was just okay. The venue does not have its own lighting, so the other production company that I was working with provided all the lighting for this. And as I've kind of looked over this footage, I'm actually surprised at how much better the Z200 footage looks than the FX6. So this is Z200, and it's showing a lot more detail. And here's the jib, and you look at this, it is noticeably softer, and it's not a focus issue. It's just the camera is not resolving as much detail. I'm not sure how much of that is lens versus the camera itself. I wouldn't suspect that the camera has any detail resolution issues. We'll find out as I get into some test footage, real test footage here later on in the video. But anyway, so yeah, that's a jib shot, and every time it cuts that, the color looks similar. All the color rendering looks more or less the same, but it is softer. So the Z200s are resolving more detail, and they are farther away as well. So camera one was a camera in the back, static shot set on wide. You won't see it used very much at all. And camera two was a little bit to the right of that, and it was kind of the main camera for a lot of the event. And you'll see any shots that look like they're more or less straight on, that's going to be camera two. And camera three was quite a bit farther off to the right. Then all three of those cameras were, I would say, probably 60 to 70 feet, 60 to 75 feet away from where the performers would be on stage. So okay size room, medium size room, not super large, but we had no trouble zooming in whatsoever on the Z200s. And then the jib was, there was a camera 4, which was actually right up against the stage. Would have been stage left, audience right, and you'll see whenever you see a side shot, it'll be camera 4, and then the jib was on stage right, audience left, and you can see that's moving around. We had basically the best jib operator in all of Utah on this event. He does a fantastic job. He was picky about what camera we gave him. He didn't want to use one of my 200s, so that's why we got the FX6, and he still was not thrilled about that. But let me back this up again here a little bit. Let's see, go to find the beginning of the performance. There we go. Okay, so kind of as we go here. So again, a jib shot, and then that's gonna be camera 2. You notice when we go back and forth that there actually is more detail in the Z200s. That's gonna be camera 3 there, I believe. It's enough of an angle. I think that's probably camera 3. And then see where we go. That's back to 2. And here's the jib again. Lots of nice solid motion out of the jib. The jib operator about somebody I've known for years and years. He does a fantastic job. He's in high demand, not just here in Utah, but a lot of other places. I don't know if I should share his name on this channel or not. I want to get his permission before I did that, but he does a great job. Always does a great job. He works for Hollywood a lot as well. All right, that's gonna be. I think it's gonna be camera 2. 4 doesn't use very often. Back to jib. Call it jib number 5. Back to jib there, but yeah, the jib is a little bit softer. Just doesn't have quite as much detail as the other cameras. So we'll double check that when we actually go to look at the 4K footage associated with that here. But as of right now, I actually think I like the image on the Z200 a little bit better. So we'll examine in a little more detail, pun intended, here in a bit. Now if I zoom in on this, we'll see. You can see some of that softening. So here's the 200. Let me go back to the. Okay, this is going to be. That one's going to be 4. That's back to camera 2. Yeah, noticeable softening on the jib. Noticeably less detail on the jib. Okay, all right. So let's pause here for a second, and I will load up the footage of the individual cameras so we can take a look at the 4K. All right, so we're going to look first here at footage from camera 2. So this is a Z200. It's going to be the same thing that we just looked at, and I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in to 200% so we can see the detail a little bit better on this. If you're watching this on a device that only has 1080p resolution, what you're seeing on your display is still not full resolution of what was actually in the original video. But so we'll kind of watch the camera 2 here for a bit, and I'll sort of pan around as needed. But I'd say it looks fairly good. I mean, I can see that it's ever so slightly soft from being zoomed in, but it still looks pretty good overall. Very good level of detail, good contrast. I'm not seeing a lot of noise. Here's the keyboardist. Alright. Get the singers there. I mean, it looks like video. It doesn't look like film, but you don't really necessarily expect it to look like film because it's not a film camera. And it's not meant to be a cinema camera either. But anyway, it looks like there's a fair amount of detail. So let's go ahead and switch to the footage on the jib and take a look at that. Alright, here we go. This is footage from the jib, and as before, go ahead and zoom in 200%. And this is starting a little bit earlier than we did a moment ago. But we should get a good idea for what the FX6 is capable of. Notice that the recording on the FX6 was actually higher quality than the cameras, the Z200s. That was not intentional. For some reason I left the 200s in 420, and the FX6 was in 422. But I'd say overall it does look good. Has a pretty pleasing image on it, but I have to say I think the Z200 actually does resolve a little bit more detail, at least with this particular lens on the FX6. So FX6 does look a touch softer, and I'm not talking about just the lack of focus. I'm talking about actual amount of detail that's being resolved. Still very good. Still very, very good. But yeah, it's not quite as crisp as the 200s are. Thankfully, the color rendering does look very similar. Very, very similar. Which means anytime someone wants to mix and match the two cameras, you can absolutely get away with it. I want to hear what you guys have to think about all of this. So leave some comments down in the comment section down below in the video. Let me know what you think about the comparison between these two cameras. So obviously the FX6 gonna have a shallower depth of field here. It was being shot on a lens that's f2.8, so a T3.0, or was it 3.1? Either way, whatever. Right, so that's f2.8 in terms of the depth of field, and but the downside is that the jib is actually pretty close to the performers. You know, in this case, the jib is 10 feet from the singers and the guitarists here. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts with this footage. So, all right, okay. Let's move on to some test footage that I actually shot this afternoon. Ignore some of the white balance issues and a couple other things, a couple focus issues in a few places. But I wanted to kind of show you shot by shot or side by side the differences between the two cameras. So with the Z200, obviously it's built-in lens. With the FX6, I was using the Ingenue lens that I showed you here earlier in the video. So it's a great lens, fantastic lens. It's going to be a little sharper than the Sony. But all this footage actually is shot in 4K. 30 frames per second. It's pretty high recording detail. I think I still had the FX6 on 422 and my Z200 on 420, but that shouldn't come into play too much here. So I think this is the shot where, this must be the shot where I went at the slowest zoom speed possible. I don't know if I'm going to make you guys watch the whole thing. It takes 6 minutes to go from full wide to fully zoomed in. The zoom speed, zoom crawl on this thing is pretty good. Alright, I'm going to jump ahead because this is going to take a while. But I meant to sort of demonstrate the zoom range on the camera. So by the time you get to the end here, that's as far, that's zoomed in all the way with clear image zoom at 1.5 times. So roughly the equivalent of a 30 times zoom from there all the way back to here. And this is why I love this camera, because you're able to do that with a single camera with a built-in lens, and it doesn't cost a fortune. So you can get this camera with the lens for far less than you would spend on a single lens on the FX6 or another interchangeable lens camera in order to get that kind of zoom range. So what else did I include on here? Okay, yeah. So here's a faster zoom of the range, so you get a better idea for how tight it can go in. It's probably hitting clear image zoom right about here. You don't notice the transition, it's seamless. Let's see if we can catch that transition from full optical to clear image zoom. That little jump was not it, that's just playback issue. Yeah, it happened before that subtle slowdown. I don't know exactly where it happened. So anyway. Okay, well, either way, I think that's close to the last clip. Maybe one more. I do zoom all the way back. Yeah, I did one where I zoomed all the way back, so I started all the way in. It would have gone farther if I was shooting in HD. These cameras, you get additional reach when you're in HD versus 4K. So it becomes a 40 times zoom instead of a 30 times zoom. All right, okay, well, there it is. I know it's not great test footage, but I just want to give you kind of a rough idea of some of the differences. And aside from the difference in the depth of field between the two, the difference is pretty subtle and allows you to mix and match between the two. And you know, if you're someone who is shooting live events and the FX6 is a camera that you're looking at or have looked at, maybe you can save yourself a bunch of money by getting the 200 instead. So anyway, I've been happy with mine. I've had mine now for, how'd that work out? So now June, I got my first one in September. So 9 months since I got my first one. And I do have 4 of them. I rushed to replace or make my primary cameras, the new ones, as fast as I possibly could. And I will likely get a 5th one as well. Before too long here. I have other priorities, but at some point I probably will get a 5th one of these cameras as well. I do like them quite a bit. They are quite an upgrade over the Z150s that I used to be using. So anyway, okay. No, this is not the most informative video, but thanks for sticking with me all the way through the end here. If you have any comments about either of these cameras or anything that I've done here, please feel free to leave those in the comment section down below. I do read all the comments and usually reply to any that merit a reply. So if you want to hear from me, that's one way to do it. You can also join me over on Discord. So go to djp.li/discord in order to sign up for that channel. Totally free. You don't have to install any software. You can do it right in your browser. And super easy to sign up. And there's a great community there. A lot of very smart people, very helpful people who are willing to share their own knowledge and experience with you as well. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. I'm not going to promise how often I'm going to release videos. I want to do videos once a week, but I've been insanely busy. And just for regular viewers of the channel, a quick update, I do have replacement projects that I am doing now since the big project I was working on for several years ended at the end of 2024. And that is eating up
an awful lot of my time, and that's why you're not hearing from me so much. In addition to that, I'm doing a lot more video jobs than I normally would be doing as well. And just in the last 7 weeks, I've been out of town 4 of those weeks on jobs. So it's things have picked up quite a bit, and they're bigger and bigger jobs all the time. And I can't wait to take you guys on a behind the scenes for one of them once I'm allowed to do so. So far, all the ones that I've been doing for the last little while have all been corporate events, private corporate events, and they're not cool with me sharing any of it. So I'm wait till I do another one in order to take you guys behind the scenes and let you see what's going on. But these are some pretty big shows. Like we're doing, and we bring in multiple IMAG projector screens. It's 4 of them at the last big event that I did, as well as the LED wall, full sound systems, full lighting rigs, you name it. Pulling out all the stops in big conference centers. And so yeah, and my job on those is usually to technical direct, and when I do that, I do multiple feeds simultaneously. So I'll do the feed for the IMAG screens, I'll do a feed for the center LED wall or projector, and then I do a feed for recording and or streaming all at the same time. So juggling a lot, but at the same time, I'm doing it often enough now where I've kind of got down to a science, and it's not that hard for me to do anymore. And so yeah, pretty cool. I've shared one video here on this channel talking about how I do that, but I've perfected my technique quite a bit, and it's not boggling my mind like it did the first couple times that I did it, and it's all become second nature at this point. But like I say, can't wait to share that with you guys once I have permission to do so. But that is occupying a pretty good portion of my time at this point, doing those big shows. And likewise, if you are interested in having me help you with something like that, please let me know that as well. So I think that's going to about do it for now. So thanks again for everybody for watching. Thanks for sticking with me on this rather lengthy video, which was meant to be very short. But hopefully it's been informative for you, and hopefully it will help you to make some buying decisions on these cameras in the future. So thanks everybody, and have a great day.